I would like to invite my dear friend Vishal Jacob, Chief Digital and Transformation Officer, Wavemaker India, who will talk on making marketing agile and adaptive through cloud. Over to you, Vijay.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, just last week, I was in a meeting with a CMO who was leading, a very strong retail brand, a legacy brand actually. For all confidentiality purposes, I can't reveal the name, but I asked him a question. What keeps you up at night? What's one of the biggest marketing challenges that you're looking to solve for? And he had a very interesting answer. And he said, Vishal, I'm not looking to solve a marketing problem, but the biggest thing that keeps me up at night essentially is my ability to adapt with a lot of agility to the market conditions around me. And that got me thinking, and I started probing a little bit more to understand what he exactly meant by that. And there were two parts to the problem statement. One part of the problem statement essentially was obviously an organizational culture, which none of us really have control over. But the second part of the problem statement actually was in the way they look at data within their organization. For an organization to actually react in a far agile and a far adaptive way, a lot of that has to do with the way they actually structure the data for that organization. So my conversation for today, and I've just been given 15 minutes to make my point, and I'll try and make a very compelling argument around that. But in this 15 minutes, I'd like to give you a sense in terms of where we feel this is headed, and what are some of the things that one needs to keep in mind while structuring data for an organization, right? So the first point I want to land is that when you look at questions that are raised in marketing, when I joined, obviously, the advertising world 2 decades back, we had a lot of strategic and tactical questions thrown at us, right? So questions around market penetration or how to increase market share within a certain geography, or finding what's the big idea, the value proposition that one can drive within a certain audience, to tactical questions around reach and frequency. And these questions still continue, and they will continue because they're very relevant and very valid. But again, there are a new set of questions that's being raised, right? And these set of questions, if you look at it, there's a common theme to it. It's around the audience data that you actually collect, and what's the first-party data, and how much first-party data should I actually collect, and how can I leverage that data? It's also about the experience across various touch points, and how is it that I can enrich experience across the consumer journey, and how can I enhance the path to purchase, and so on and so forth. And when you look at data and personalization across the customer journey, how is it that I can take decisions on a real-time basis? So the common theme over here is obviously, it's all stemming from the fact that data has become an extremely critical element within an organization's, purview. And there are different functions within the organization that's trying to solve for it. You'll find people within the human resource all the way to sales and operations are looking to solve for it in different lenses, right? When it comes to marketing specifically, and obviously I'm not going to talk about the other functions, but marketing specifically, there are a couple of key challenges. When you look at the data that we get in marketing, and I obviously have a purview across industries, there are two key challenges. One challenge essentially is that there is a whole lot of data that's coming in from different sources, right? It could be from the campaigns that you do. It could be the call center data that you get, or the chatbots that you use to kind of engage with your audiences on your web. It could be the analytics data that you sit on, and so on and so forth. And each of these data points try to solve a certain kind of marketing problem. The challenge, obviously, over here is how do you streamline all this data and draw meaningful insights out of it on a real-time basis. And that becomes a bit of a problem for a lot of people, because this is easier said than done. So on theory, as it looks, there are multiple data streams coming in. Let's all put it together and draw insights out of it. But in reality, it's an extremely difficult and challenging problem for a lot of organizations to solve for. And this challenge, if I can extrapolate, is broadly around 3 core reasons, right? And I'm not going to talk about the culture of data within an organization, but if I talk about the infrastructure that's needed to solve for this, essentially, is that when you scale your business and when you scale your campaigns and when you scale any of your initiatives in marketing, the scalability aspect of it takes a huge toll if you don't have the right infrastructure in place. And when you look at drawing meaningful insights of analyzing this data, it is very critical for everyone to understand that there are multiple aspects that one needs to talk, multiple tools that need to talk together to kind of come up with insights. So we have a client, for instance, that uses 4 or 5 different types of analytics tools for different types of problems, right? So a certain kind of tool for analyzing data, a certain kind of tool for looking at your MAUs and DAOs, a certain kind of tool for looking at attribution and stuff. And all of them essentially are 3 different types of tools for the same organization. And if these data points don't necessarily talk to each other, essentially, then it becomes a huge challenge to take any meaningful decision. And the third essentially is agility. Now, when you look at analyzing data, and if you don't have the right infrastructure on board, and if you're looking at log level data, essentially, the effort that's needed to kind of analyze any single piece of data, it's humongous if you don't have the right kind of infrastructure. So to solve all these 3 problems, what's changed essentially is cloud, right? So the data that actually rests in a local server now being on cloud helps you scale data far more effectively. The access of data and working with multiple APIs becomes a lot more easier, and therefore you're able to analyze without having very complex systems in place. And this seems to be the way in which a lot of the new age marketing folks are trying to solve for problems within their existing organization. So now I'll just talk about some of the areas that we see cloud actually making an impact. And this is my part in this presentation where I'd like you all to focus a little bit more on, because I'm going to touch upon various aspects of marketing that you never thought. And it's an underlying aspect of marketing essentially, but these are the most critical elements that one needs to keep factor in mind, which will actually change the marketing landscape in time to come. So let's look at analytics, for instance, right? So everything that we currently do online today is powered by data, and obviously it gives a lot of information about what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you. What we've done at our end, obviously, is to try and create different types of models, right? So these are 3 examples. We've got a lot more than that, but these are 3 examples that we currently have. So the customer lifetime value, for instance. Now, to understand the customer lifetime value of a certain brand or a certain organization, essentially, we've looked at looking at event level data of every single transaction that's happened for a brand in the last 5 years. And seen what is the recency at which someone has actually purchased the product, what is the frequency at which the person has purchased the product, and what's the monetary value, right? And basis that you align a certain score, and you can arrive at a customer lifetime value for that particular brand or product as such. And while it may sound simple to do that kind of an analysis, the kind of effort that it takes in terms of processing all that data actually becomes a very cumbersome task. And this kind of analysis would never have been done if it had not been for the cloud systems in place and having the right kind of infrastructure and the people to analyze their data. Right? The second kind of model that you see is around demand generation and association rules. So association rules essentially is about trying to see what kind of product works well when it comes to bundling, right? So you would have seen across all e-commerce sites, essentially, they bundle products together because there's a certain logic behind what product works with another. And that, again, is done through a lot of historical data of trying to combine various attributes to find out what kind of product will sell better if you kind of bundle it with another product. And they look at geographies. There is an element of audiences, geographies, price points, and a whole lot of other variables that come into play when looking at this kind of an association rule. Demand generation, for instance, just look at another problem that we're trying to solve for, because in a certain geography, if there's a certain event that's happening, what is the demand that you can expect from that event, right? So if, for instance, if there's Holi, or there's Christmas, or there is New Year, that could be a physical event in a certain pin code, what is the kind of expectation that you could have from for a brand as far as the sales is concerned is something, again, that we're trying to solve for. So now all these models essentially needs a whole lot of data coming in together to be analyzed on a real-time basis. And the kind of scalability that one needs to factor in, the kind of real-time analytics that one needs to factor in, again, can happen only on cloud. So this is one key use case that I wanted to land with all of you all. The other thing is about audiences. A lot of you all would have seen, for instance, all the reports that have been published today. I think Vijay talked about it in our opening speech, that this is the year when when you look, digital spends have actually overtaken television spends, right? So broadcast is no longer the game right now. It's one-to-one communication that one needs to focus on. And it's not necessarily about having one communication that reaches out to all, but it's about having single pieces of communication that reaches out to different types of audiences. So the traditional norms of having a single unique proposition might not necessarily be valid anymore. It's about coming up with multiple value propositions that appeal to a certain audience segment. So when it comes to that, I think audience segmentation becomes a very critical element in digital marketing. And while there are ways in which you can create audiences from the various signals that you get from multiple platforms, but the fact of the matter is when you look at your own data, an organization's own data, it has to rest on an infrastructure which can be segmented, and you have the ability to test and learn what audiences are working for you in which geography for what specific product. And to do that, again, you need to have a very agile system on board, which can then look at data that can be passed into multiple platforms, where you can analyze and see what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you, right? And this kind of analysis and test and learns can be based on interest. It can be based on the kind of segments that you create, based on the geographies that you all sit on. It can be based on multiple aspects around behaviors of consumers, occasions, and so on and so forth. So that's the second thing. And I think the way one looks at running and operating a CDP is the customer data platform. CDP is called the customer data platform, for all of you who are not aware. But it becomes a very, very critical element in an organization. And that's another area where we see marketing moving forward towards it. The third use case on cloud, essentially, and I talked about audience segmentation, is the way you put out creatives, right? So again, at our end, one of the third problem that we're trying to solve for is how do you churn out creatives on the fly for the kind of audiences that you're really created on board. And this can become a very cumbersome task if you're looking at production of creatives in a traditional sense. So a lot of automation needs to come on board. And again, this kind of automation happening on cloud, happening on a real-time basis is something, again, very critical. Again, a third big use case for cloud. And I think one needs to keep in mind that when it comes to making creative, it's about reaching out to the right audience in the right context, in the right platform, with the right value proposition. And this, again, can happen, one, through automation. And I think, again, Vijaya talked about ChatGPT and all that stuff. And this is one area that we're going to be seeing. Again, none of this would happen if, again, systems don't talk to each other. And again, the third big use case as far as cloud is concerned. The fourth one I'd like to talk about, again, which is very interesting, is that when you look at segmenting audiences across the country or across any sort of geography, you look at IP addresses as probably one of the different units around which or the IDs around which you create a graph, right? But just imagine this, that you have the ability, when you're capturing data, you have the ability to layer your intelligence about your customers with a whole lot of other things. And the problem that you can solve through this, the first one which I'm talking about, GeoGraph, essentially, again, is that you can find ways in which you can upsell and cross-sell your products in multiple PIN codes across the country. Through occasion graphs, again, once you have your own set of audiences, and when you layer it and enrich it with third-party data, you have the ability to then figure out ways in which you can customize your communication and personalize the communication based on the consumption that that one does. So just imagine, for instance, one of the CPG brands, we're trying to kind of work with Swiggy to understand when a person consumes this particular product, what is the food preference that this person has. So you can actually profile those audiences, and you can understand the time of the day the person is consuming it, what is he consuming it with or without, and basically in which geography, how the taste preferences actually change. Right? So basically the occasion graph, the geographs, and these are multiple other graphs that one can create, again, layering your own data with a whole lot of other third-party data. So I've made 4 compelling use cases around cloud, but the reality of the matter is that when you look at us as agencies or any person within the marketing fraternity, you look at anything that an individual does today online, right? Whether it's us as an agency that's looking to plan media for clients, whether it's the kind of creatives that we're going to come up with, whether it's the kind of analysis that we do, the optimization we do, every single aspect of our agency life is now moved onto cloud. And therefore, the ability for us to be agile in the way we kind of act and react to the market conditions actually becomes so imperative for us to have an understanding of how we can bring systems together and how we can change the culture of an organization to react basis cloud. So that was the conversation that I wanted to have today. Just to land one important point apart from the use cases that I talked about, one very big use case, as Vijay was mentioning, is that we're launching this thing on data clean rooms, as we felt that one of the areas that one needs to put a spotlight on in time to come essentially is in the area of data clean rooms. This we believe is going to be one of the most critical aspects that one needs to look at in time to come, because when you look at marketing spends moving on to digital, a whole lot of spends essentially is going to be done on walled garden areas, right? So, for instance, the data that you sit on is something that you're not comfortable sharing with any other third-party partner. And even if it's sharing it with Google, you don't be comfortable if Google gives you a certain guarantee that that data will not be misused. Google or Facebook or Meta or any other publisher, if I say so. So one way to solve for this, and well, every organization is going to collect their own data, and one of the big use cases always how do you collaborate data between multiple organizations is through data clean rooms, right? So the only way that one can actually win over time is where you're able to kind of enrich your data with other third-party data providers in a very privacy-compliant environment, and therefore we feel data clean rooms is something that one needs to focus on, and that would be one strong area around which one may need to put a spotlight on. So we've talked about in our report, the importance of data clean rooms. Why is it very important? We've talked about the what of data clean rooms in terms of what are the different types of data clean rooms. There is a media neutral data clean room, and there's a media specific data clean room. So you have Google themselves were coming up with their own data clean rooms. You've got Meta, which is coming up with their own data clean room. You've got Amazon, which is coming with their own data clean rooms, which helps you understand ways in which you can segment your audiences, target them, and measure the effectiveness of your audiences, right? So that's the third part of the entire mix, which is the why behind data clean rooms, the what of the data clean rooms, and also the why behind it through the multiple use cases that we've got, which we've covered in this report. So with that, I think I've completed my 15 minutes, Vijaya. So I think I'm done with my presentation for today, and I think we have a panel discussion headed right after this. So yeah, I'm done. Anyone wants to have a question? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vishal, for your great insights on data clean room. This is the strongest point here, and here we want the spotlight to be.